Uh, Ma'am, we'll wait for 5 minutes for the people who are still joining, ma'am.
Sure.
We can start it.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Myself, Protractor Shruti. First of all, let me brief you about today's session. We all know that maintaining your mental health is vital for living a happy and healthy life. But unfortunately, millions of people struggle with mental illness that leave them feeling helpless and alone. On this note, we have brought to you a section that will address certain areas of mental health and help you tackle problems related to it. So now we'll have an introduction about our speaker by Rotractor Pratiksha. Over to you, Pratiksha.
Thank you, Rotractor Shruti. Good evening, everyone. Myself, Rotractor Pratiksha Kage. Today, it's a great pleasure for me, ma'am, to introduce our speaker, Dr. Georgetta Valliamattam, who will enlighten us about the importance of mental well-being and how to balance ourselves in emotionally draining situations that can lead to stress, anxiety, or other mental illnesses. So she is presently a postdoctoral scholar at the Center of Neuroscience, Indian Institute of Science, Bengaluru. She was previously assistant professor of psychology at Geetham University, Visakhapatnam, as also consultant psychologist at the Geetham Institute for Medical Science and Research. She was a gold medalist during her master's in psychology at Andhra University. She completed her doctorate in psychology as a Fulbright Nehru Scholar at Purdue University, USA, and received the Best Dissertation Award for her work from the National Academy of Psychology, India in the year 2019. Part of her dissertation research also received the Best Research Paper Award at the American Psychological Association's 2019 convention at Chicago, USA. Prior to her current position, she completed advanced training in human animal interaction studies from the University of North Texas and IAABC, Pennsylvania. She has worked in multiple capacities as a research assistant with the Indian Council for Social Science Research and as a subject expert with both the UGC EMMRC countrywide classroom program and the distance learning program of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University. I'm honored to have this wonderful opportunity to present to you Dr. Georgetta Valliamattam, madam. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Shruti and Pratiksha, for the kind introduction and also for arranging this. So all of you have put in a very commendable effort, bringing people together, bringing things together. So Shruti also sent me a couple of your questions that were shared. So it is a nice thing. So I try to incorporate a bit of it in the PPT, and I will also be addressing questions. We'll leave out some 20 minutes, hopefully, for the Q&A session. And I think that is where we can really, interact and address a lot of questions, because at a generic level, we speak about a lot of things, but then specific problems are also specific, right? So one thing, please see this as a safe space, so you can share and you can, you can be open, you can freely share whatever you would wish to. At any point, if you would want to, interrupt and ask something, that is also very welcome. So I'll be sharing my screen, going into my teacher mode and, putting up a PPT. But having said that, what I want to tell you all is, see, I may not be telling you something entirely new, because we know a lot of tips, techniques. If you just Google it, you will find hundreds of tips to maintain, how to maintain well-being, how to, be more healthy. All those things come up. So what I may, I thought I'll just share 6 tips with you, because based on what works a lot and what is applicable across scenarios. So and maybe those are the things we forget a lot. It is not that we don't know, all of us know things, but we forget to apply. And it applies not just to students, it also applies to us. Even though we have studied psychology for so many years, these are the 6 things, or, some of the 6 things that, or many things that we forget ourselves. So this is just like I would say, a cheat sheet or a reminder, whatever you would want to take it as, so that even though you know it, this is a reminder that you have to apply, you have to, think about it whenever you go through, your daily life. And after that, we'll also be, after the 6 tips, we'll deal briefly with multitasking, because that is what some of the questions were dealing with, and also regarding anxiety, because I think particularly with the pandemic. That is something which is affecting us a lot. Fine. So I will just share my screen, and as I said, feel free to interrupt at any point. Very welcome. And also let me know if I'm not audible or anything, any technical glitches or anything of that sort. So just give me a moment. So is the screen visible to all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. So yes, so just as I have put it up there, these are just reminders. Okay, it is these may be things that you have come across a lot, but just a reminder that these are things which you can actually apply in your life and you can actually benefit a lot from it. So the first tip out of the 6 tips, now this is a tip which is applicable across, which will come across scenarios. It is a very generic thing, but it is a very important thing which we forget a lot. And that is the first tip, that is to be honest and to be flexible. And why I say we forget it, because at least to ourselves, we are the most dishonest people, and we are very, very rigid with ourselves. We are flexible for everyone. We are flexible for our teachers. We are flexible for our friends. We are very, very flexible people that way. But for ourselves, we are very, very rigid. We put up very rigid expectations from ourselves, and very rarely are we honest with ourselves. So that is why it is very right to say that the hardest thing is to be honest with yourself, to say to yourself that, yeah, I cannot do it, or this is something which is beyond my capacity, or I am not happy in this moment, or even if it is my best friend, I don't want to do this. We deny it to ourselves. And frankly, let me tell you, this is something which research also says, that our pain thresholds have gone up, because we do a lot of things that we are unhappy about, and we kind of lie to ourselves. We tell ourselves that I am happy, I am fine. And why so? Because perhaps we are expected to be like that. So if you go to any of the social media applications, or any of, you browse through Instagram, you go through Facebook, you see a lot of happy things, happy pictures, happy stories. So you give yourself this explanation that I have to be happy, I have to be perfect. And even though you are not, you try to be that. So that is why, and this is a point, I will not talk much about it here, because this is a point that will come through across all the other tips that I'm talking about. Because many a time, sometimes clients or people who come in for counseling or students ask me that how do we know that we are going on the wrong track? So I often tell them, and this is something I believe in very firmly myself also, that we know it. It is just that we shut that voice down. Our mind tells us, our brain tells us that this is going wrong. I can't do it. This is beyond my capacity. But we become so used to shutting that voice, that after a point we fail to hear it. So listening to yourself and being honest with yourself, that what is possible for you? Are things going? Are you stretching beyond your limits? So that is the basic tip which can totally solve many of the problems that we face. But as we go through, we will see how that tip is. So let us come to tip 2, that is saying yes and saying no. Now, why I put these question marks is, this is a dilemma that is always there in our life. Should I say yes or should I say no? And the kind of expectations that we are surrounded by, everyone expects us to say yes to a lot of things. And sometimes in our anxiety, all that we want to do is to say no to a lot of things, or maybe to everything. But because we are expected to say yes, we say yes. Because we have all these, captions, we have all these slogans that yes, you can, yes, you must do. Everything has to be yes. If you have to be that perfect person, if you have to be that vibrant person, you should be saying yes, you should be involved in everything. Right? Saying yes is good. But what about saying no? So maybe a lot of our problems can be resolved if you know when to say yes and when to say no. Or then what are the questions I should ask myself before I say yes and before I say no? So that is where the first thing I say is, it is good to get out of your comfort zone. sometimes when you have this dilemma that should I say yes or should I say no to something, if anyone expects you to do something, or there is a task given to you, or maybe you are asked something, whether in your college as part of your studies or as part of a friendship or a relationship, whenever there is a demand that is put on you, the first thing that you should ask yourself is it useful to me? Okay, is it something that is going to benefit me? Short term, long term, is it good for me? So if it is, so you will have an answer that yes, it is good for me, or no, it is not so good, or it may be that it is going either way. It is something that is neutral. The second question is, why am I saying yes or why am I saying no? Am I saying yes because I really want to try it out? Or am I saying no because I'm just scared? It is just a fear that is within me, that what will happen? If you are saying no because of fear, immediately, you should, it is a time to say yes, because there is something, it is just a fear that is, if you know this is useful to me and I'm just saying no because I'm afraid I will fail, then your no is not a valid no. You have to switch to yes, because it is just this irrational fear which is building up. And frankly, there is nothing that we should be afraid of, because maximum what is going to happen, we are going to fail, right? And all of us know that life is a long process. You fail, you succeed. In fact, there is no full stop to life. Everything is like a comma. There are things, even when you feel in the darkest moments, you feel there is nothing. For those of us who have lived through it, we know there is something which comes up later. Some things change. So if it is fear that is making you say no, then definitely you have to say yes. Yes is the answer. But if it is something else which is there, if you're saying no because there are a lot of pressures on you, you can do that thing later, or this is not the right time, you're very uncomfortable doing it, and the only reason you are saying yes is because you're feeling guilty. What will my friend feel, or what will my teacher feel, or what will my girlfriend or a boyfriend or whoever it is, what will they feel? If that guilt is driving you to say yes, remember, you have to say no. So it is this basic thing. If it is so, I always admire these two quotes by Coelho, because it brings out this very essence. So it says, say no without guilt. If you are saying yes just because you are guilty that am I meeting the expectations of someone, then that is not the reason why you should say yes. You should say yes without fear, and you should say no without guilt. And whenever you say yes, ask yourself, am I saying no to myself? And in what way am I saying no to myself? Am I saying no to my fears? Very good. But if I'm saying yes and saying no to my own sense of relaxation, my own sense of comfort, I'm stretching myself beyond a boundary, then definitely say no. And one reason why people do not say no is guilt. Always, it is this pressure of meeting someone else's expectations. And frankly, the reality in life is you cannot really meet everyone's expectations. You are going to fail at some point, and that guilt is going to build up again and again. And slowly guilt leads to a sense of anxiety. Anxiety leads to depression. It becomes a loop. So the very important thing, whether you are doing a multitasking thing or whether you are, feeling anxious, remember, maybe you are taking up too many things on your shoulder. You are saying yes to too many things. You are not saying no enough. And the most important lesson in life is to say yes when you are afraid, but no when you are not comfortable. If you're not comfortable, say no. Don't be bothered. People may feel bad, but people will get around it. If they are people who really value you, they will understand you. They will understand that, there was a limitation, there was a problem. And if there are people in your life who cannot take a no for an answer, they are very toxic. That is a toxic company. It is better you get out of that. So I would say, if you really want to test friendships also, because many people say that, is this a good friend? Say no once and see what is the reaction. If that person can accept your no in a right way, that is a good friendship. And if you can accept a no from someone, you are a good friend. because there is no point of time where you can keep saying yes. So that is also a simple test of friendship. Say no and try it out. So always remember this very thing, if it is very, very confusing, ask yourself, why am I saying yes? Is it because I am guilty? Switch to no. Is it because, I have to please someone? Switch to no. Is it because I want to do something useful for myself and I want to overcome a fear? Switch to yes. So those are, that is one simple, rule that I will tell you. And most probably, because there are so many pressures in our life, we are more pressurized towards saying yes. So practice saying no, just for the sake of it, practice it. The more you practice, the better you become. And this is something that I will, tell you a lot, because brain is a very, very flexible thing. And now I study neuroscience. So the more I study, the more I realize that your brain is the most flexible thing in the world. You teach it, it learns. So you say no 5 times, you become more comfortable with it. So practice it. I would say just for a practice, learn to say no. So the next step, what to remember and what to forget. Because often I see people and I see students who remember a lot of things which are not necessary. Forgetting may not be possible, but they don't know what to push out of their active, memory or that active brain processing. And they remember a lot of things which are not necessary, and they forget a lot of things which they ought to remember. So that is again a problem, what to remember and what to forget. So the first thing to remember is that your brain is a very, very flexible, system. It is not that, of course, you will be surrounded by a lot of positivity, you will be surrounded by a lot of negativity. You cannot totally escape it. But your brain has a fairly, complex, sophisticated edit mechanism. You can edit, you can modify, you can do a lot. You may not be able to erase, but there are a lot of editing options available with your brain, better than any kind of Photoshop or Illustrator. Your brain is very, very capable of editing things. So one common question people say is, when we are surrounded by negative people and they tell us negative things, and we remember that and we feel very low. So I say it is again a problem of what do you choose to remember and what do you choose to forget. So suppose you come late to class, and I'm just giving you an example. You come late to class and your teacher tells you that you are a useless person. You can't even come on time to class. Now, there are 2 statements that are made here. One is you are a useless person, or your teacher may be irritated. Your teacher may say, I don't think anyone should say this, but suppose your teacher or your friend is very irritated. They say you are a useless person, you are a fool, you can't, do anything properly. You can't even come on time. So of course it is hurtful. It hurts us. And it is not like we can, totally snap out of it and switch off. But what we also do is that we repeat it. There is this loop which goes on. It is like a cassette, which goes on. It is something which keeps on, replaying itself in the back of your mind. And that is what you have to edit. So of course, I wouldn't say that you can snap out of it. We are all human beings. You may remember it for an hour. You may remember it maximum for a day. But I think beyond that, it is time to tell yourself, I'm replaying it too much. So what do you remember and what do you forget out of it? So out of this statement that you are a useless person and you cannot come on time, you will yourself realize that one statement is very broad. It is not a practical statement that you are a useless person. It is a very, very broad statement. There is nothing you can do about it. And if there is nothing you can do about it, more or less, that is a statement which has come from another person's irritation. That is a reflection of another person's personality. Because when you're frustrated, you say a lot of bad things about people. Or someone else may say a lot of bad things, but that is a reflection of their frustration. What can you do? What you can do is perhaps the doable portion is coming on time. So that is what you have to remember. And sometimes I also tell, students who, and sometimes you are surrounded by negative people. Maybe it is your family member, maybe it is a parent who keeps on telling you a lot of negative things or keeps on putting you down. So I say, at the end of the day, out of all the negativity, write down what is doable, what you can improve on, what are the things which are actually practical. Those are the only things you need to be remember. You need to remember, you need to keep in your mind. The other things, the other bad statements, the other negative statements are coming out of another person's negativity. You do not need to pull all of it into your brain. Okay, your brain is not a, your brain has a magnetic capacity, but you do not need to stick everything. You can pull certain things out and throw it away. Just like you would pull out pieces of iron that are stuck to a magnet, it is important to pull it out. Pull out those things which are not needed. And it is very important to be thick-skinned. When I say thick-skinned, it also, to some extent means that you can be a little bit, shameless also at times. You can say that, okay, you called me 1, 2, 3, 4 bad things, but I am not going to remember it, because if I remember it, I am going to stop in my track. If you are going to replay that I am useless again and again, you will not be able to move forward. You have to be a little bit shameless and say that if I am useless, that is fine. I'm going to throw it out. But what is doable is perhaps I can come on time. Or if there is no reason, there is nothing doable in this conversation, I'm going to throw this entire negative conversation out. And that requires you to be thick-skinned. That is why I say, be very, very thick-skinned in life. There are times when you are learning new things, people will find a lot of faults with you. People will tell you, oh, you can't do this. The only way to move forward is, at the end of the day, maybe write it down on a whiteboard, maybe write it down in your journal. What were the practical things I could do from this conversation? If there is any practical thing I can improve on, I will do it. The rest of the things, imagine that you are pulling it out one by one and throwing it off. And once you have thrown it, consciously try not to replay it. Your brain is, a tricky place also. It will try to replay it. But that is also a trick which say thought stopping. When you say that, a thought is replaying itself, tell that thought to stop. No, you are useless. I can't do anything with this thought. So stop that thought, pull it out. If you want, you can visualize it also, that you're pulling something out of your brain and throwing it away, and begin anew. So why I also tell write it down is because when you write, it is a multi-sensory thing. Your brain gets this, kind of anchor. So if you write down that, I can improve by coming on time, I can improve by maybe, making a list, your brain hangs on to it a little bit more than all the other negativity. So write down those positive things, and that is what you remember. The other things, make it a habit to push it out of your mind. So that is again one tip. So again, as I say, these are things which you may have heard about a lot, but your brain will only learn through practice. You practice it 5 days, it becomes easier the 6th day. The 7th day, automatically these thoughts will go off, and you will learn to, become that person who can focus on the useful things and automatically sift out the useless things. So coming to, the next tip. So yeah, and that is a tip that I say, never take a break to take care of yourself. Never do that. That is a statement I make to myself, and I see many people that I will take a break, I'll finish this, then I'll take a break, and I will, do this, I will do that. Why do you need to wait for a break? Never do that. And often we get so engrossed that that break never comes. We say we will finish this work, in the weekend I'll watch a movie, I will do this, I will do all those things. But by the weekend, you have new tasks, you have new guilt, you have new anxiety, that break never comes. Frankly, I am a victim. I do this thing. So I have promised myself I will watch a movie for the past 3 weeks. I have not done it. That is why I say never do that. Never create a big issue out of a break, that I will take this big vacation or a big break or a big thing. It will never happen. So a break is something you put in your regular schedule. And that is where anxiety builds up, because your brain is not getting a rest. It is not getting a break. It is going on and on and on. You are waiting for that break, which is not coming in. Your brain is waiting for it. Your brain gets tired. Your brain doesn't have any more expectations out of you. This person is going to continue. This person is never going to take a break. And your brain goes into burnout. So that is why I say, relaxing is also doing, as you can see in that image. It is an actual act. You don't need to feel guilty about it. So tomorrow, if you feel that I have gone through 7 hours of classes for 5 days a week and I cannot cope up any longer, don't feel guilty about it. Write to your teacher and say that this is too much for me. I need a day off. It is okay. And don't feel that, my classmates will do better, or there will be a lot of important things that will be happening. You are intelligent enough to cover up. All of us have that capacity to cover up, provided your brain gets a break. And particularly considering we are in an online, scenario still now, the pandemic, we do not really have a sense of time. Initially, it used to be 9 to 5 classes or 9 to 1 classes. You had a system. Now it is almost, because people are working online, many people feel that you are continuously on a break. So work also keeps on coming continuously. So it is very, very important to make that time in your schedule where you are relaxing, you are consciously relaxing. Unless you do that, you will never ever progress. Don't think, even if you have spent a little extra time relaxing, a little extra time sleeping, don't feel guilty about it. All that time is time saved, because your brain is getting rest. It will do double the work once it gets the rest. And again, it is very important to ask yourself what relaxes you. Don't just go with whatever relaxes your friend. Your friend may feel relaxed after watching a movie. You don't need to do that. You may just feel relaxed by just sitting in one place looking at nothing. Or you may feel relaxed by taking a walk. Your friend may need 1 hour to relax. You may need 2 hours to relax. So it is a very flexible thing. That is why I say be honest and be flexible. We often go by other standards. You say that, okay, my friend took only a 1 hour break. Why am I taking 2 hour break? Why am I doing so many things? Or why did I, waste an entire weekend? So I recently had one of my colleagues tell me, I totally wasted the weekend. I couldn't do anything on Sunday. They were so guilty about it. If you're going to feel guilty when you are relaxing, you are not going to relax. So relaxation also has to be guilt-free. So that is one thing I say, when you're relaxing, relax fully, even if it is for 15 minutes, even if it is for an hour. Don't keep thinking about many other things. I would say, I don't know how many of you have started going to movie theaters, or rarely will you see people engrossed. Even in a movie theater, people are checking their phones. Even when you're watching a movie at home, you're checking a phone. While you're going out for a walk, you may be looking at emails that are coming in, or someone else. And of course, I think WhatsApp is the biggest headache. It is a very useful thing, but it is also a very problematic thing. There will be constant messages coming in. So you're not relaxing, basically. Your brain is on work. It is always on duty. You are just convincing yourself that you are relaxing, but you are not. So that is why I say simple. This is a very simple thing, but things that we forget. Eating well. Sometimes many people suffer from anxiety and depression also because your body physically doesn't have enough nutrients. Your body requires a certain amount of basic nutrients, including sodium and potassium and magnesium and all those basic nutrients, to be able to function well. If you're not getting that, automatically your brain goes into a state of anxiety, and you feel that I'm feeling this anxiety because of studies, but it may be because you're just not eating well. Sleeping well, your brain needs that basic relaxation. Your brain needs exercise, because exercise brings in all the good hormones, and particularly once you're sitting at home watching or attending online classes all through, it is like a continued process. That is why I also recommend that when you're relaxing, don't just switch from your screen time to another screen time. Often you feel that, okay, now I'll relax by checking Facebook or checking Instagram or checking my Snapchats, or I will relax for an hour and watch a movie. That may not be actual relaxing, because your brain needs a change of work or a change of setting. So if you are having, and particularly now since you are having a lot of screen time, you need a relaxation which is very, very different, which may be like you are going out, or you are focusing on some hobbies, you're doing something very different, something physical, a physical activity, or you are not anymore focusing on the same kind of activity related to a screen and a computer or something like that, or that light which emanates from a screen. So you need a change of activity. It is not just relaxation. Your brain also needs a change of activity so that it is actually recuperating. And as I said, live that experience, mindfulness, because if you are constantly on your phone while relaxing, it is not a relaxation. So go for a walk, leave your phone at home, or at least make sure that your phone is somewhere in a bag, not even in your pocket, in a bag, so you have to make an effort to take it out. So you'll not take it out very easily, and then go for a walk. And consciously try to, or tell people that I'm not available for this 1 hour. I will, or this 2 hours, I will not respond to messages. You need to do that. And that will bring a big change in your life. And I will also mention a small syndrome that many of us are having these days. That I don't know how many of you have that. You can raise your hands. That before going to sleep, we often check our phone for long periods of time. Yes, Manikanta already puts up his hand. So
even
yeah,
after waking up from the bed, Usually,
Yes. Even after waking up, before going to sleep, and sometimes there is nothing new to see, but still you will be going from one screen to the other. Have any of you experienced that? You have seen all the notifications.
yes, ma'am.
Still you will be, and that is your brain's reaction. You know why? Because your brain, and this has happened a lot during the pandemic, and there are studies which are related to this. The reason is your entire day is scheduled, 9 to 10 classes or 10 to 11 classes, assignments, everything is scheduled. So now your brain needs to let out. It needs some time. So it obsessively tries to assert its freedom. So if you're trying to, like, if you keep a dog chained, or if you keep someone chained, if you, I don't recommend it, but whenever you chain an animal and you let it out, you will see the animal runs around for a long period of time. It is an expression of freedom. This obsessive, browsing is also an expression of freedom, because your brain can't do anything else. It wants to assert its freedom, and it uses whatever it can do to relax, and it becomes a compulsive habit. So even if you want to sleep, your head is aching also, you will still check your phone. So recognize this is a pattern, and the only way you can handle it is to keep your phone aside and to go somewhere else, to a very different place, and relax. Because as long as it is near you, you will pick it up, you will handle it. Because your brain is shifting automatically from one stressful screen time to a less stressful screen time. That is the automatic reaction. If you need to stop it, you need to keep those gadgets very, very far and move out. And, relax. Only that way your brain will totally relax. Another tip that I will tell you, the world is connected. This is something that we are forgetting a lot, particularly in the pandemic. And also we are not in touch with our friends. When we were coming to classes or we were meeting physically, we used to meet people. It was like a rule that you have to meet people, but now we may not be doing that. So that is one thing that is very, very important. And I like this quote a lot. That is why I often keep this, that, what is important, whether it is the journey or the destination. All of us have destinations in mind. All of us have our own journeys. But what is very important is who comes with us on that journey. And it makes a lot of difference. So that is why two things I always tell people: if you're feeling low, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling useless, if you have got a scolding from your teacher, if you are feeling, I cannot do this, I cannot do anything for myself, do something for others. It may be a random act of helping. Do something. It may be helping an animal, it may be helping a human being. Do something, because your brain comes back to normal. Your brain understands that, yes, I am capable, I can make a difference. So I will tell this, that do something for others. You may not know that person, you may not know anyone, but do it. Because it is one way of, it is something, not just are you helping others, you're helping yourself in a big way. Your brain comes back to normal, because in a way our energies are connected. This world is a connected space, whether it is plants or animals or human beings, all of us are connected in a way. So if you are feeling low on energy, your mental energy, is depleted. When you connect with someone by helping someone or asking for help, the energy balances out. So sometimes that is why you may feel that even when you're feeling very low, if you talk to a friend for 15 minutes, you may not be talking about your problem, you may be talking about something else. You feel good. The reason is because there is a, energy connect that we have. So do things for others and ask for help also. Never feel shy that, should I ask for help? What will that other person feel? Just ask. And if you feel that this person cannot help me, or this may not be the right person, because asking for help also, you should know who to ask for what kind of help. That is why I say, know your inner circle. It is very important to identify few good friends, because that will make your life easy. You do not need many friends in life. I think most of you by this age, we recognize that quality is more important than quantity. And have that 1 or 2 or 3, whatever that number is, friends who stick by you. And they are the people who will point out if you are wrong, but they will not put you down. They will be ready to take a no from you. They will be honest with you. They will be flexible with you. And keep those people. If you feel that you have no friends, you have not searched enough. There will be people around you who are good, who match your wavelength, and whom you can be with, and whom you can share things. You cannot share everything with everyone. Remember that. Because whenever you want to share your problems, think about who can understand this. Some people may be able to understand, some friends are there whom you can share anything. They will keep it confidential. Those are the general kind of friends whom you should keep. But maybe if your problem is specific, there will be certain friends who may not understand much about your family or the problems that you have with your family, but they may understand something about your work life, your studies. They may be able to give you tips there. So don't expect that one friend will maybe give you solutions for everything. You may want to go for different things to different people. So keep that flexibility within you. And at the same time, also find out who are the good people, because otherwise it can be problematic. If you want to share something very confidential, share it with someone who will keep it confidential. So you will know, that this person is going to keep it or not. You can judge it. Like if you keep your eyes and ears open enough, you will know that this is a person who may share it with someone or who may not share it. So be very careful whom you share your thoughts with. Your inner circle is your confidential circle. You can be honest with them, you can be flexible with them, and spend time with them. Even if it is online, even if it is over the phone, spend time with your friends. Your parents may tell you it is a waste of time, your teachers may tell you it is a waste of time, or whoever tells you it is a waste of time, it is not a waste of time. Because you need to connect with people. That is when you keep your mental sanity. It is okay even if some time goes, if you talk to your friend over phone for half an hour and then continue your studies, it is okay, because your brain needs that kind of connect. The last tip before I talk about anxiety and multitasking is frame your own rules. So this is also a problem that I see with people is they take rules from others. So one thing I will say is, take tips from others. It is very good. Today I am giving you some tips. I just gave you 6 tips. One is to be honest. One is to connect with people. I told you to relax. I told you to say yes, when to say yes, when to say no, and it's very important that it is to say no. And sometimes it is important to forget things. I gave you certain tips. You can take all of this. But at the end of the day, you have to create your own rules. And it is very, very okay to create your own rules. What works for someone else may not work for you. Just don't take rules from others. That is why I say someone may relax for a certain period of time. Someone may study for a certain period of time. Someone may wake up at 4 o'clock and study. Others may sit up till 1 o'clock and study. Your rules. Don't be, trying to imitate someone else's rules, because at the end of the day, all that matters is it should work for you. If it works for you, it is good. It is a good rule for you. So take tips, but don't be so, so stressed out that why can't I do it in this way? There are 100 ways in which you can do one thing. As long as it works for you, it works for you. You are not answerable that why didn't you do this way, or why didn't you do in a certain way. Don't feel unnecessarily guilty. What I also find in a lot of students is they feel unnecessarily guilty. They feel that we have to do things in a certain way, or we have to meet a certain standard. All these are very arbitrary things. There is nothing called a certain standard or a certain rule. Whatever works for you, as long as you are not harming or hurting others, is a good thing to do. So frame your own rules. Now, apart from this, I will just give you some very quick tips on multitasking and time management, because this was a question that came in and I think a lot of us talk about it. So basically, I will ask some of you, what is multitasking? Any ideas what is multitasking?
Doing multiple tasks at the same time.
Doing multiple tasks?
Yeah, ma'am.
At
the same time.
At the same time?
Yeah,
Okay.
example, listening the class and using the phone.
Okay, listening to the class and
using the
phone. Okay. So doing multiple things at the same time is multitasking. All of you agree with this definition, or anyone has a different definition?
No, ma'am, it's the same definition.
Same definition. Okay. So I'll give you a very bad definition. So if that is the definition that we are going by, then multitasking is the act of messing up several things at once. Destroying a lot of things at once, because we do not really understand. I always feel we do not understand what is multitasking. And we feel that multitasking is cool, multitasking is not very cool. So the first tip I will tell you, if you can avoid multitasking, avoid it. You don't need to multitask always. If you can avoid it, avoid it. But if you cannot avoid it, you have to understand what is really multitasking. So multitasking is not doing several things at the same time. That is, simultaneously. Multitasking is able to do several things in one period of time. So you do not need to, do it simultaneously. You just have to finish it in one set of time. So if you have to finish 3 tasks in 2 hours, doesn't mean that you have to do 2 tasks at the same time. You can also finish one task and the second task and the third task within that, 1 hour. So we often confuse multitasking as simultaneous work. It need not be simultaneous work. And most of the time, if you have to do simultaneous work, it fails because your brain has a limited span of attention. So you may be expected to complete an assignment. You may be expected to complete 3 assignments in a day. Or you may be expected to listen to a class, complete a Coursera course and complete an assignment. But remember, you cannot do all of it simultaneously. You are going to go crazy if you do simultaneously. You have to do it in a certain period of time. And that period of time can allow you to do one thing and the second thing and the third thing. Just because you have to do 3 things in a day doesn't mean you have to do 3 things together. You can finish one thing after the other and then go into the third thing. So that is one basic definitional problem we have with multitasking. And if you cannot do, if you are supposed to, if the work pressure is so much that you are supposed to do 2 things together, if that is your expectation, that is what is expected of you, I would say try to say no, because you are overburdening your brain. If you are given 1 hour and you are asked to do 2 assignments that require 1 hour each, that is an impossible multitasking. That is when you will be messing up several things at once. Say no to one of it, and don't feel that guilt. Be brave enough, be bold enough, even to tell your teacher that this is not possible. It is okay. It is still okay. So that is where you have to say no. If you are asked to multitask in things which really are beyond you. So that is where I say schedule and organize, because you have to do a lot of scheduling and organization. Again, frame your own rules. Just because your friend is doing Google Calendar, you don't need to do Google Calendar. You don't need to make hour by hour frame, of tasks. There are people who make minute by minute plans. It works for them. It need not work for you. Choose what works for you. If writing in a diary works for you, do that. If planning date wise that I will finish 5 tasks in a day works for you, do that. If you want to put it more specifically, I will finish this much in this slot, this much in this slot, do that. Frame your own rules. Don't take someone else's rules. I have seen people who frame timetables time wise, get anxious and can't finish any of it. Frame it date wise. Just say that I will work at whatever time possible, but I will finish this five tasks in a day. I don't need to put a slot wise kind of arrangement. So keep it as flexible as you can manage. There is no point creating a timetable. A timetable is meant, or a calendar is meant to organize, not to create anxiety. If it is creating anxiety in you, your organization should change. Again, very importantly, why do you do all this organization? Because you need to prioritize, you need to club things, you need to delegate things. At any point of time, there is something which has slightly higher priority. And if you think about it enough, you will know that there is something which has higher priority, something which is not that, this. And when you are stressed out, you feel everything is urgent, everything is important, but everything is not important, everything is not urgent. There are certain things which have slightly higher priority at this point of time. They should come up in your list. Certain things which you can do together, maybe they're similar kind of things, club it together. And there are certain things which you do not need to do, someone else also can do. If you're doing your teamwork, if you're too stressed, you don't need to do everyone's work. You can delegate tasks. So many a time we multitask because we are not prioritizing, we are not clubbing things together, and we are not even delegating. We are doing all the work on our own. That is one reason why this multitasking becomes difficult. Again, time box. Time box is where you keep a time limit. You say this task will take 1 hour or 2 hours. Keep a realistic time limit. If you feel it is 1 hour, keep 1.5 hours. Keep a little bit extra, because that will also help in managing anxiety. But keep it a little bit extra. That will help you multitask, and that will help you finish things faster. If you know that, okay, this task should not take more than 1.5 hours, you know that you have to finish. If you do not put that kind of a time limit, a time break, you will keep on doing that task. And that is one good way to, multitask. Again, block out distractors. If you are doing something, keep your phone away. And if you really, observe it, you will realize that if you have blocked out 1.5 hour time, and if you're keeping your phone next to you, at least 15 to 20 minutes, you are checking your phone, you're checking notifications, you're checking WhatsApp. So keep those things away. Blocking out means keeping it as far as possible. Even if you want to reach out, your phone should be not within your reach. That is when you can finish things and multitask. And especially when you're multitasking, remember that everything cannot be perfect, okay? Nothing can be all perfect. There are certain things, highest priority things, you may be able to do perfectly. Certain things you will be able to do fairly well, but you will not reach that level of perfection, which is okay, because that is why you are doing multiple things. So some things are bound to be not so perfect, which is okay. You don't need to obsess over it. You don't need to be frustrated over it. And sometimes if you can finish a little bit early, if it is not that perfect, it is still fine, because you will have time for revisions, but finish it first. Don't go into that level of perfection that you're stuck on. So this is one thing that I really like, I really like this kind of chart, because it is very useful, I feel, because it says that when you are prioritizing, there are certain things which are urgent and which are important to do, which have to be done very urgently. Do it right away. Keep it in the beginning of your list. There are some things which are important, but which are not urgent. Keep little time every day to do it, because it is important, but you still have time to do it. There are certain things which are not important, but which are urgent. Maybe, someone else can do it. Suppose, there is something that has to be sent across. It is a teamwork. It has to be sent across to a teacher. Maybe another member of a team can also do it if you're doing something important and urgent. You can delegate that responsibility. And then there are certain things, a lot of things which are not important and which are not urgent. And we waste a lot of time on it. We feel it may be important, or someone may ask. As long as there is no deadline, delete it. So when you do this kind of a time prioritization, ask, is it important and urgent? Then it should be at the top of your list. If it is not important and it is not urgent, delete it off. And you will realize that a number of things get deleted out of your list. And if it gets deleted, you have more space. So many a time we do not have time because we are not organizing things properly. We are saying that everything is urgent and important. Everything need not fall in this slot, in this do slot. Divide things in these 4 slots and you will find a lot of time. And yes, apart from that, a few other quick things I just say that target to finish early. This is also something for people who have anxiety, because I say that if you have a timetable and if you are scheduling, if you're organizing something, if you have an exam coming up, you are starting your preparations, date your timetable or date your schedule from 2 days later, but start your work today, so you're always ahead of time. Suppose today is the 21st, say that I will start studying from 23rd or 24th, but start working from 21st itself, so you will be always ahead of your schedule. And that reduces, particularly for people who have anxiety, that reduces a lot of anxiety. Second, and this is also again for something very important for people who have anxiety, don't create very tight schedules. I see people telling me that 9 to 9:15 I will sorry they start even early. They will be like 7 to 7:15 I'll brush my teeth, 7:15 to 7:30 I'll have breakfast, 7:30 to 8 o'clock I will get ready, 8 o'clock to 8:30. Just seeing that kind of schedule, I get anxious because it is too tight, and I feel that I cannot handle it. How can you go like that? Keep 5-10 minutes break in between, because you are a human being. If you are putting 7 to 7:15, you will get ready. Maybe start your next task at 7:25, because you are human. If you are just putting that tight time slot, you will cross that time slot. You will become anxious. Your entire day will go off. So don't create very tight schedules. Create loose schedules. You will still finish your work, because if you think very clearly, much of our time is lost in anxiety, lost in thinking about how will I do certain things, is lost in checking for WhatsApp and other kind of distractors, updates, Instagram, Facebook. Because you are anxious to curb your anxiety, you go to all those things. So that is why don't create very tight schedules, and say no. Again, something that we already discussed. Say no when you feel that this is beyond me. Even the best people, even the most, efficient people say no. They say no to great opportunities. And as long as it gives you peace of mind, just don't feel guilty about it. And remember, multitasking is completing multiple things in a given period of time, not simultaneously. If you're trying to do it simultaneously, one of it is going to get messed up because your brain has a limited capacity. Again, very quick tips before we break for questions in dealing with anxiety. Again, I think couple of tips that I talked about in time management or multitasking can also be used for dealing with anxiety, because often when we are multitasking, we become so anxious that we can't do anything. So small things like reducing the amount of things that you are doing, saying no to a couple of things, or creating more spaced out schedules can reduce the amount of anxiety. And if you are generically feeling anxiety, I would say identify causes, because there is a specific cause for anxiety always. Either it is your personality, some of us, which is very okay. Some of us are more happier than others. Some of us are more prone to be sad. Some of us require a lot of, stimulation. Some of us are okay with a laid back lifestyle. Some of us are more anxious. Some of us are very relaxed. This can be a personality dimension, which is okay. You don't need to feel guilty about it. There may be one of your friends who is very cool and you may be very anxious. It is natural. She or he is natural. You are also natural. This is how we are. This is how we are programmed. But we try to bring ourselves to a balance, an optimal level. So I would say mental health is a continuum. There is no one who is absolutely normal. If you say that this person is normal and this person is abnormal, you are going into a wrong classification. All of us are at different levels of normalcy or, abnormalcy. We are trying to be, we are moving up and down that ladder. That is how we are. On a stressful day, any of us goes towards abnormalcy. On a happy day, most of us go towards, well-being. So we are on that shift. So it is, very important to know that it is okay to be me. Identify the causes. You will say studies are making me anxious. It may not be studies. It may be one subject. It may be one chapter. It may be one topic. Pinpoint what is making you anxious. Don't put generic statements. And this is one thing that often, patients or, clients come up, they say, studies are, make me anxious, or this thing makes me anxious. I say it is not everything. It is something specific. If you think about it enough, you will find that specific thing. And then there will be triggers. Often when we face a lot of anxiety in certain scenarios, things get attached. We become conditioned to it. Shruti, I think we are going beyond time. It is okay if we stretch a little bit.
Yeah, ma'am, it's okay.
It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yes. So, I would say look for those triggers, because many people, what happens is whenever you have a bad experience in a certain place, that atmosphere gets attached to that experience. That is also called conditioning. We feel that, sometimes suppose if you're, and it is very natural. There is no rationale behind it, but it is natural. So suppose if you wore a certain dress and you went for an exam and you did very badly, after that you have a slight kind of aversion sometimes you develop towards that dress. Or sometimes if you are facing a lot of pressure sitting in one space and one room and studying, you feel scared to go into that room. Or many people attach anxiety to certain triggers. And particularly for people who suffer from a lot of anxiety, certain times of the day can be triggers. You may feel a lot of anxiety when you are waking up in the morning, or when you're going to sleep just before you go to sleep, or sometimes in the middle of the day, which is rarer. Most people have morning anxiety or night. So, what we call nocturnal. So there can be certain situations like physical spaces which can trigger anxiety in you. There can be certain times of the day which can trigger anxiety in you, particularly those of you who are going through recurrent anxiety. So identify the cause, look for the trigger. So you may know that in the morning when I wake up, I am having excessive anxiety, which is a natural phenomenon which can happen. And what you may be doing is you may be browsing your phone, or not doing anything, not able to get out of your bed because you have this much of anxiety or depression within you, because most of these symptoms get worse at one of the times of the day. So when you know that trigger, you can deal with that trigger. So often if you know that early mornings are difficult for me. I get anxious. Make a schedule early in the morning and go from one task to the other, push yourself, because if you get out of that, 1 hour or 1.5 hour, which is that phase where you will be very, very anxious, you will be able to continue with the day. So just, push yourself that I know that this is a time where I'm not very well. So I have to finish. I have to go ahead. I have to go ahead. Just keep repeating. You will be able to finish off and and after a while, the levels of anxiety come down. Similarly, if you feel that a certain setup is making you anxious, I say change the position. Sometimes even changing the furniture in your room, changing the lighting in your room can be very, very helpful. These are very basic things, but it can change your mood. So even changing the, getting, scented candles or getting some kind of any change in sensation, whether it is tactile, whether it is visual, whether it is auditory, that is why sometimes you relax listening to music. So whatever it is, it can bring about a change in the way your brain is perceiving things, because everything is perception. You're taking in from your senses. So look for triggers and deal with those triggers. If you're feeling anxious, the moment you get into your room and look at your books, it is time to change maybe the position of your table or the position of your chair or the lighting. You will be able to cope better. Also, there is what we call problem focused coping. There is what we call emotion focused coping. So if you can identify the cause, this particular thing is causing me the anxiety, go into problem focused coping. But if you feel that generally I'm feeling anxious, anxiety is something which is there in me, whatever I do, you can use emotion focused coping. Share with others, do whatever makes you feel better. It may be taking a break, exercising, changing the patterns in your room, as I said, or doing something which is enjoyable. So if there is a specific cause you can identify, do it. But if it is more generic, it is part of your personality, think about emotion focused coping, because you will have to continue it all through. And these are things which will not, these are not things which will just go off. This is a continued effort you will need to do. You will need to work on it every single day. Every single morning you may need to push yourself and say, no, I am worse in the morning. I need to get out of this and I need to, go ahead. And this is one thing which I always say, schedule worry time. Because many a time when you're doing things, there is worry coming in. What if I cannot finish this? Or I should also have studied this part of the syllabus. What if I can't do that? There is this constant, thoughts monologue which is happening behind you. So schedule a worry time, say that, okay, 8 to 8:30 in the evening or 8 to 9 in the evening or whatever that, don't keep more than half an hour. That is the time where I will worry about all of these things. So push it. You don't need to worry about everything all through the day. And particularly for those who are constantly worrying, this helps a lot, constantly anxious. So you say that, fine, I will think about this. If you want, you note it down. This is a worry. I will think about it 8 to 8:30. And trust me, by the time you reach 8 to 8:30 in the evening, most of your worries will go off. They will no longer be worries. And this is how you focus. So you can, that is why I say, if you are constantly anxious, constantly worried, schedule a separate time to worry. By the time you reach that time, most of your worries will not be there. And always, this is a thing which has a lot of research evidence also, walking through the doorway. So they say that if you're feeling very anxious, just get up from wherever you are, go through a door or go through a passage or go out of the door. The reason is, when you change that kind of physical setup, your brain also goes through a change and you do not remember all those worries as much. And it is effectively, it is a thing that your brain goes through a shift when you shift the atmosphere. So walk through the doorway. So that is basically change, or call a friend, do something, but you shift. If you walk in the same room, it will not go off. But if you walk out of your room, if you walk out of that space, the thoughts will become lesser. The anxiety will become lesser. So these are small tips which can be very, very helpful. And yes, one, last thing, remember, you don't need to do everything, particularly for those of you who face a lot of anxiety, because anxiety can be very, very painful and crippling. I have seen people go through it. And, at some point of time, I have also, I think, gone through it in certain, stages of life. I know it is very, very painful. So you have to take it one day, 1 hour, one task at a time. Identify that these are times which are more difficult for me. So if the morning time is more difficult, 1 hour at a time, I will finish this somehow and I will go. I will get out of my room. Or if, for this task, I will focus. I will not think about anything else. I'll finish this task and then I will think about all my worries. So this is, don't think about the future. Focus on smaller things. And as your brain learns to go through it, you will also feel confident that, yes, I have crossed this day. I can cross the next day. So it is only in small chunks that you can, go through that process. And just this final slide, which, I will tell you that anxiety can become a habit. Once you start worrying about things, you become habituated to it. So that is why try your best not to make it a habit. Try to break that habit where possible. So it may be leaving out a few things, saying no to a few things, only accepting a few things, prioritizing things, making a schedule that is that is more flexible, that is feasible for you, taking breaks, doing things in your style. Do whatever is needed so that anxiety doesn't become a habit. If it becomes a habit, it is a very difficult habit to break. And at times it may be part of your personality. It may be how you are. So it may be becoming uncontrollable. You may find it difficult to function. If it comes to that level, then definitely you have to seek help. You may feel that it is not going even by, talking to a friend or talking to someone. It is not, I am not improving. If that is the case, always, do not hesitate to ask help. And, whenever you ask help, remember that help will be given. Don't think too much about whether I should ask or whether I should seek help or why am I facing the problem when others are not facing. Because as I said, there is no one in this world who is absolutely normal or absolutely abnormal. We are all on this, kind of scale, going up and down this scale. You, me, anyone. Just because I have studied psychology for a couple of years doesn't mean that I do not go through anxiety or I do not go through depression. I also use these same things to overcome. So all of us are moving up and down. And all of us may know about these things. It is just that can we apply it in our day-to-day life, right? So yeah, so these are just basic things that I wanted to share with you. But yeah, now we will go to questions. I think I have a couple of them in a chat. Okay, in the chat box. Let me go through the first. Okay. So the first question is about wishful thinking. So how can I escape wishful thinking? So this is again a loop, So if expectations, so you have also said in your, so this is Vijay. So you also say that having expectations brings me more harm than good. So somewhere you are scared of expectations, right? So because if you feel that you have expectations, you may not be able to meet. So that is perhaps creating a level of anxiety in you. And, but then again, you engage in wishful thinking. So one simple thing that I say is, if expectations are creating, so many a time I tell people that, visualize success, visualize that you have done this. It works for some people, but for some people it creates anxiety. That if I visualize this, will I be able to reach? So one way is, don't keep any expectations, at least not any great expectations, but limit time for wishful thinking. Because wishful thinking is something which you can do all through the day. So just as I said, any of the thought process which is impeding in your work, say that, yes, I will think about this in this period of time. Maybe, 10 to 11 or maybe 9 to 10 before I go to sleep. I will think about everything that I need to do or I can do. But there are certain things which I have to do. So those are the things I would say, write it down and just start off. Many a time we cannot start, we engage in wishful thinking and we keep thinking because we are too scared to start something. And we are too scared to start something because we are overthinking about it. That how should I do it in the most perfect manner? So I would say, just if your wishful thinking is not allowing you to do something, write down that 1, 2, 3, 4, these are the 4 things I need to do today. And without even thinking about it, just start off. It is okay even if you fail, just start off. and complete those things. However imperfectly you're doing, complete those things. And keep on, keep that wishful thinking aside for some other period of time, for some, time of the day. That is one way I think you can escape, because the major problem with wishful thinking is you just keep thinking, you don't do things. So I would say don't think, just start doing what you have to do, and keep a certain time apart for the thinking process. So you can say, whatever I did, if it is not good, wishing that it could be done better, all those things I will think about in a different slot. I'm just also looking. Yes, exactly. Allocate a time, avoid it at all costs at all other times. And this is not just for wishful thinking, for any other thoughts that are annoying, which are impeding your anxious thoughts, worries, all of this, allocate a time, a specific time. And one thing you will notice after a few days is that when you come to that time, you will not have much of that wishful thinking left. Much of the worrying thoughts will also go off. So, okay. So there is this question, certain things which hurt deeply, we can't forget. So, okay, so there are certain things which we have to remember and which we want to forget also, right? Because certain experiences teach us lessons which we want to remember. But at the same time, if you are not going to push it out, if you're going to ruminate too much, you will not move forward. So I would say sift it, okay? So there is an experience which has hurt you deeply. So there may be, there may be this entire narrative of that experience which you have. But what do you want to carry with it? There will be certain lessons. There is a narrative. This happened, their entire story, this happened, this person told me this thing, I said this, all that narrative is there. And there may be certain things you learn from it. There may be certain lessons also. So I would say, remember the lessons, because that is what is going to help you in the future. But the entire narrative, you don't need to remember. Because if you remember the entire narrative, that is the hurt which happens. And then you cannot move forward. So suppose if you were, for instance, if you tried to help someone, but you were not successful and the other person found fault with you or blamed you, it is a very hurtful experience. So what do you remember from that narrative? One thing you can remember is, okay, I said this, I tried to help, I did all these things, still that person didn't understand, they hurt me back, they told me so many words. You can also choose to remember it in a 2-sentence fashion, that if I did my best, I need not feel guilty. It is okay. That it is that person's, hurt that they told all those things. But as long as I did my best, I can, I am fine. Or if you did not do, if you did some mistake, then you can remember it as, it is fine. Whatever happened, happened, but I have to learn this, that maybe I should not trust someone too much, or I should not, leave certain things for the last minute. Forget the narrative. Remember the lesson. That way you will have lessons to hold on to as you move forward, but that hurt will reduce over a period of time. If you repeat those words, those statements, if you recall the expressions of people, then it will be very difficult for you to move on. So if possible, maintain a journal, write down that this is what I want to, this is the lesson I will take from here. The rest of the things, don't focus on it, and automatically it will reduce. So I would say the priority is the lesson you learned, not the entire narrative of the scenario. Okay, so this is a question. There are few people in life whom we want to forget, but we are unable to. How should we overcome that? Okay, that is a tricky question. I would say, frankly, maybe I would, as I mentioned, I wrote remember and forget, but it is not actually forgetting. It is pushing things a little bit to the back of our memory, because I don't think we can totally forget anything, but we can choose not to repeat or not to recall certain things. So I would say something similar to the answer that I had in the first question. There may be, why do you want to forget certain people? Maybe you want, it is their behavior, it is something related to what they did to you, it is something related to all that has happened. So if you take whatever lesson you can take from it, and also try to understand it in a way that sometimes people do certain things, you need not necessarily forget people, you may not need to forget someone, as much if you understand people, because all of us act in certain ways either because of the scenario or because of our own problems. So if someone says something very hurtful or does something very hurtful to you, one way of getting over that negativity, if you try to forcibly forget, you may not be able to succeed. One way to make sense of that is maybe they are facing some issues in life, they are facing some kind of problems, so maybe that is the reason why they behaved in a certain way. When you understand that, you feel less angry. When you feel less angry, that person becomes less important to you automatically, the person. So we tend to remember people in anger, in happiness, people who are very close to us we remember, people who are our enemies we remember, but people whom we understand that okay, there was a reason for that behavior, that is it, those people themselves go out of our memory. So try to understand that there is a reason for what they did, and it is not your fault, or it is not something that you could help, and it becomes easier for you to move that person out of your memory or out of your space. And again, if there are negative influences, try your best not to come in contact as much, particularly if you're finding it difficult to handle. Reduce contact, because out of sight to some extent is out of mind. So try to maintain that comfort space around you. And also I say, if you forgive people, it is easier to forget sometimes. So understanding people is also one way to forgive the hurt that they have done. Okay, this is a good question, that listening songs comes under relaxation. Yes, it can come under relaxation, provided you feel it is relaxing. And again, the music may differ depending upon in what space you are, or in what, I think music is also very specific to the situation that you are in. So yes, listening to music can be a way of relaxation, but I would also tell you, don't shift from one electronic media to another electronic media very quickly. So if you're listening to classes till 5 in the evening and then you start listening to music and working, it may be too much for your brain to handle. You may feel it is relaxation, but your brain is still going through a lot of stress. So try to take a break, try to go out, try to protect yourself from that kind of sound and light, or whatever screen time or auditory time is, and then switch to it. But yes, music can definitely be relaxing. And I would say, if possible, don't use too much of that headphone thing. Headphones are pretty great, you feel great, but your brain is under a lot of stress in the process. So if you're listening to music, if it is possible, just listen to it like without headphones. It is good for your brain in general. It is less taxing. So yes, some tips to get out of PTSD. I would say, again, this is very much dependent on the type of trauma that you have. So I'm just taking it in a generic sense that you may have gone through some kind of trauma. And I would say some people feel better by speaking about it. So if you feel that, and it is not wrong to speak about it, it is very important, if possible, to speak about the trauma. And as I said, it can be to a friend whom you feel is a confidential person, is someone who understands, who is not judgmental, a good friend basically, and who is not going to share that information to 10 other people and create an issue. So make sure that is your inner circle. So yes, sharing, and if not, approach a counselor, because that is a sure short way that you have a friend who is not going to share it with someone. So the counselor or a psychologist is your friend whom you can trust by default. So share it. So sharing, and whenever you are in trauma, you may share multiple times. You may share again and again, which is fine. Suppose if your friend is under trauma, they may talk about the same incident again and again, which is okay. Because the more you talk about it, the impact becomes lesser and lesser, and slowly you normalize. So the one thing is, but don't force yourself to talk. Give yourself space. Sometimes the phases of trauma are very unique. You may not want to speak to anyone for a week or two, or for a month, but then you may want to share. So this may also happen to a friend. You may ask, why didn't you tell me earlier? Because they were not in a position to speak. So if the patterns are very different, if possible, speak about it. After you speak, or if you want to write about it, whatever feels good. If you want to record it, if make sure that it is a very, it's not something that people will take advantage of, but sometimes you don't want to say to anyone, but you just want to record it, write it in a diary or voice record it. Let it out. Letting out is very important in post-traumatic stress disorder. Once you let out, again, all the other things, all the things that I said, relaxation or, distraction, going out, doing other things, all those things help. But the first important thing is don't try to escape it. Go through it. You have to go through it. It is a trauma. It is part of you. You will have to talk about it. There is no escape. If you escape it, it is a false route. You will need to come back to it. So don't be scared of coming back to that trauma. Don't be scared of talking about that trauma, sharing it, and then go to, other relaxation mechanisms, I would say. So yes, that is the general process that you talk about whenever. And if you feel it is something very difficult for you to handle, take help, take professional help to handle it. So another question I find is how to overcome self-criticizing. So I would say, why are you criticizing yourself? Maybe because you have a standard you are comparing yourself to. And frankly, there is no standard that we can compare ourselves to. So often we are critical of ourselves because there is a comparison. We are comparing ourselves to someone near us or someone in the media. There is something that we are criticizing, because if you are just comparing yourself with yourself, you will understand that, okay, I had this difficulty or I had this problem. That is why I could not do this. But whenever you are comparing yourself with others, you forget about all the limitations you had. And you are just doing this, very biased comparison that he or she could do it, why not me? So I am wrong. It is my fault. So tell yourself, if you could not do, or if you had a difficulty, there is something which prevented you. Ask yourself, what prevented me? And make a very honest analysis. As I said, be honest that, okay, what prevented me from doing this? Be critical, but don't criticize. You can be critical, you can be objective. I wouldn't say don't even be critical, be objective about yourself. Why couldn't I do it? Was it because of fear? Was it because I wasted time? Was it because, I didn't have time? So you will get an objective analysis, what was going wrong. And one good thing I would say is, think about your problem as if it is your friend's problem. If your friend came and told you that I could not do this thing, what would you tell your friend? You would ask, why couldn't you do it? Or you would try to comfort your friend, no, you could have done it. It is basically because you will try to make them understand that you had this problem, that is why you could not do it. If you can show that kind of understanding for a friend, why not yourself? So I would say, whenever you have a problem and you are putting a lot of blame on yourself, think it is no longer your problem. Think it is your friend's problem. If it is your friend's problem, will you blame that person so much? If you cannot blame your friend, you should not blame yourself also. So have an objectivity. And this is something that I would say across problems. If you cannot find a clear thinking, think that it is not my problem, it is someone else's problem. And how will I deal if someone else comes to me with this problem? That is the way you should deal. I will be compassionate. To a friend, you will be very compassionate. So you have to be also compassionate with yourself. So that is one thing I say, we edit a lot of, things when we process things. So yeah, those are, I think possibly very generic answers to the questions. But yeah, definitely, of course, because we are overshooting time also, but if there are other questions that, you would want to reach out to, or something specific that you would want to ask, like you do not want to, share here, or there is something specific that you would want an answer to, I would just put my official email ID here. You can, yeah. So I have a question from Henry. I think I can see your hand raised.
Hello, ma'am. How are you?
I'm fine. Oh, Henry. Yes. So again, yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I have 3 questions.
Yes.
Anger issues. Like when I was in the hostel, if you don't want to face any family member or any sort of discussion, which I
Yes.
could escape when I was in hostel.
Yes.
But because of this pandemic and all, I think many of us might be facing.
Yes.
You have no escape. You got to face it.
Yes.
And anger is not what you choose actually, but it comes anyhow. You behave in certain way,
Yes.
like you don't want to, and you regret after that.
Yes.
After that happens, and I become very much blinded in my anger that I be ruthless to my to elders also
Yes.
sometimes.
Yeah.
And they understand me in a very different way. So how to cope with anger? And the second question is, people who don't come out of their bubbles, like they self torture themselves with certain cause. They obsess with the cause that is cause that the reason that is causing them pain.
Yes.
And we you said that, yes, of course we all know that happiness increases when you share and sadness decreases when you share.
Yes.
But when you confide in
Yes.
sometimes when people confide in us
Yeah.
their pain or something, and they don't want to get out of that, they are not actually looking for a outlet. They are not actually looking for an answer from us, but they actually, some might be just want they just someone to listen to them. That is okay.
Yeah.
But some people, just don't they just don't want to come out of that. They are just obsessed, and it also drains our energy, and we can't escape. Because when you say, yeah, of course at some point you have to say no.
Yeah.
But by then the damage must have been already happened. Yeah. And the third question is the thing with music. I've seen many people who obsess with the sad songs, sad music, and the music being the source of relaxation or stimulation.
Yes.
How far it is okay, how far it is normal to be obsessed with sad music or a specific genre of music.
Cool. That is an interesting question, particularly the last one. Yeah.
Yes, I would go with the third one too.
Yes. So yeah, I will start with the first one, anger. So I totally accept the fact that even for the best of us, when we are, put in a spot, which is also the way we are in a pandemic, because we have to deal with a lot of things which otherwise we would not be dealing with or seeing. It is very natural to become angry. But again, the way our brain is, because it is so used, as I said, to habituating itself, once you react angrily, it becomes habituated to another angry reaction. It becomes habituated to another angry reaction. So whatever you do, once your brain loses the amount of, resistance to repeat it. So it will be able to repeat it. So you will realize that once you shout, you will feel more inclined to shout the next time. You will feel more inclined to shout the third time. So it is a loop. And it is the same with everything. Our brain functions in a loop because it is like a magnet. It is trying to see, what should I make of this world? What should I learn? It is always trying to learn new things. So one way is, I would say, if you know that there are certain things which are going to trigger you, and you may find it difficult, particularly if you are in a family, there are certain discussions which are problematic, or there are certain topics which are going to, lead to a certain kind of things. I would say try to avoid it. So I do it sometimes, particularly with some friends or sometimes even in family, when I know that, okay, this discussion is particularly stressful and I cannot handle it. I'm going to lose my temper because otherwise I'm stressed out. I just excuse myself. I say I have some other work to do and I come out of it. So that is something that, I do. So that is one part of, handling it, is to avoid it if possible. So if you cannot avoid it, if people are putting you in a spot, that is when I would say that the normal thing that we say is think before you speak, but it is not easy. We want to react. So I would say something that I mentioned, just get up and walk around a bit. or go through somewhere, just say that give me a moment and come back. Some people say counting backwards from 10 to 1 is effective. Whatever is effective, counting backwards or just moving out and coming in. The reason is because when you are angry, your entire body, because it is a stress response, it is basically a stress response, it is a physiological response, not just a psychological response. I mean, it's not purely, it's your mind body, it's a mind body connect. So there is this huge energy which comes in and you want to spend it in some way. So you may throw things, you may speak out, you may shout, your body wants to spend the energy. So why do you tell people to count backwards? Not because they have to learn counting, but because that energy gets spent there. Or why do you tell people to walk around a little bit and come, or just go around and come once? Because the energy gets spent there. Or sometimes, punch a pillow and come back, because the energy gets spent there. But of course, I'm talking about safe mechanisms. People use unsafe, people throw things or do things or hurt themselves because they try to redirect that energy or shout. So there is an energy that is built up in your body. You need to release it, see it at that level. So if you release it in some other way, and making a quick round, your brain loses its focus. So whatever you say will automatically be much more calmer. Or whenever you feel that urge, get out of that scenario for, even if it is for 10 seconds, I will tell you that makes a difference, because your body becomes calmer, that energy is spent in something else, and then you come back, and whatever you say will be slightly more rational. And particularly if people ask you for solutions, that give us a solution, we are having this discussion, or keep this in mind, give me 10 minutes, give me half an hour, after that I will tell you, because whatever you're going to say at that point in the heat of the moment is going to be wrong. So I would say excusing yourself if possible, taking a break and coming back. And if you are asked to say something, what you have to say is give me 5 minutes or give me 10 minutes. Keep that as a response, ready response, and take that 5 minutes and come back. So, and if you practice this enough, I would tell you that things will improve. After a point, you will lose that urge. The amount of, stress hormones that your body is producing will themselves get reduced. Your inclination, you will get more used to saying this and taking that break. Sometimes you will not even take that break because your body will become, your brain will become used to it. So these are the 3 things I will tell you to try out. These are very common tips, but if you practice it, it works. That is what I would, say. To your second question, so the second question was about people who share a lot of things with you, but who do not want to improve. So those are the people who focus only on emotion-focused coping. So all that they want to do is to share the emotion, which is good, but you have to take a step forward. So I would say that, even if like if a person has gone through a trauma, they may repeat it a couple of times, but there should be shifts in the repeat. There should be slight increases in positivity that come in. But if you see that a person is just stuck over there, I would say it is good to tell the person that it is good. Don't kind of deny that person the opportunity, because you may be the only outlet the person is talking to. But also say that, see, we are talking about it, which is very important, but how do we find a solution? Break them, remind them in between again and again, how do we find a solution to this? Or do you not want to solve this? And maybe sometimes what happens is people become so comfortable not comfortable, I would say so used to being in the problem that they can't even imagine what a solution looks like. Ask them, if this problem were to be resolved, how would your life be? Make them imagine that, because sometimes they don't even have an imagination. They are so stuck here only. So all that they want is to be stuck here. So imagine that if this anxiety goes from your life, if this problem goes from your life, how would your life be? So if they tell you that answer, maybe they will get that desire ki, okay, my life can be like this. So I want to move towards a solution. So those are things which you can try on your own. But if you feel that still it is not working out, I would say it is important to redirect the person to a professional, because you don't want to be taking that amount of negativity, because there is a lot of negativity. I would say this even as a counselor. After going through a couple of counseling cases, I need to de-stress myself. So I know that, okay, I have gotten a certain level of negativity within me. I talk to my friends, or I, relax myself. So I know how to deal with it. And if you are not a professional, you are not supposed to take that kind of a burden on you. So I would say try to mold that person. If not, you also try to redirect that person to a professional. Say, I'm always there, but this is what you should do, because this is what will give you a solution. If you repeat it a certain number of times, maybe the person will become more inclined to know that, okay, unless I find something for myself, this person is not just going to listen to me totally. So they may feel inclined to move. To the third question, I would say, what kind of music? I think it is a very complex question, because I would say personally for me, there are times when music that is mood congruent helps. There are certain times where music that is mood incongruent helps also. So it is a very strange thing. I think that what your brain chooses at that point, I think it is a very intuitive thing what your brain chooses, because I know there are times where I am feeling low and I want to listen to a certain type of music. All that it will help me do is cry, but I feel better after it. So it is cathartic, which is good, because it is okay. I would say crying is a very good thing. Many people say you should not cry, you should not, stop crying, you should not talk. It is important to cry, it is important to express. And that is also a thing about PTSD. It is important to express because feelings can't be bottled up. So, but sometimes there are people who, even in the bad mood, they listen to some kind of peppy music, and suddenly there is a mood shift that happens. That also works. But I would say go with whatever is comfortable to you at that point. If you don't feel, and that is not just with music, any kind of relaxation mechanism, go with what suits you. It is a very personal choice. So for me, maybe, one thing which totally makes me happy, I know, which I know will make me happy 100%. Personally, for me, I know that if I'm in a very bad mood, I'll go and play with my pets, or I will go to a pet store where I can see a lot of kittens and puppies and all. I know 100% it will work for me. But I know also that it doesn't work for a close friend of mine. It will traumatize her even more. So it is a very personal choice. So listen to yourself, I would say. Honestly, as your brain wants, give it what it wants, and you will be happy. So whatever relaxes you, sleep in. Some people sleep for hours together. They feel that is the best relaxation. Do it. Don't feel guilty about it. What relaxes you, relaxes you. That is it. Does that answer your questions?
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah.
So Ashish, I have a hand raised, I guess.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Yeah, ma'am. So my question is, how should our attitude be to people who are sad or depressed? Because most of the advices we get from people is that people who are sad or people who are crying should be actually left alone for some time.
Okay.
And few set of people say that they can't be left alone. They have to be approached, and we have to tell them encouraging words and all that. So what exactly is the right kind of attitude?
Okay, I would say the right kind. If someone is alone, if someone is depressed, crying, whatever that mood is, they are in a bad state, I would say approach first. First approach and ask them, what do you want? So do you want to speak? I am there here. Do you want to, speak to someone? Can I share in your problem? Or sometimes they will say yes. They may cry, they may be not immediately, but if you stay some time, they may want to open up. You can just say that I am here if you want to talk, be there. But if they are very insistent that leave me alone, I want to, be alone, I want to spend some time in isolation, respect that choice, but tell them again that, see, I am here only, I am somewhere near you, or I am just a call away. I am leaving you alone because that is your choice. But I am there, because sometimes when people are left alone, they have that feeling that no one is there actually, and that is very easy to get, and that is how many people take wrong steps. So somewhere they need to know that I am left alone, not because I don't have people around me, but because they are respecting my choice. And put in a message in between, put in a call in between, that, see, you want to stay alone, but I am there. There is a solution inside. If we sit together, maybe we can find some solution. So I would say eventually that person will, they may want to stay alone for a day or a 2 or a week, whatever it is, but they will come around. or at least they will get out of it themselves, or they will talk to you. It is very possible. So I would say approach, ask the choice, and even if they choose to stay alone, remind them in between that you are there, because you can avoid a lot of tragedies in that process. That is what I would say.
Ma'am,
Yes.
just to add to that, so does this apply to unknown people also? Like, for example, we see a person sitting and crying in the college or in the campus alone.
Yes.
So, you know, I mean, we personally do not know that person, but, you know, somehow we feel that, okay, this person is sad. So, I mean, is this attitude or is this approach okay for unknown people as well?
I would say yes, even for unknown people, because it is very, very, like, even if you don't know a person, it may be very odd to, you know, go directly, but try to make that effort if possible. Just, you know, you can even take an excuse and ask them, you know, I want to know this direction, or can you show me something? Or, you know, just ask some random question. But it is important to break that chain of thought that they have, because you don't know whether someone they know will find them, or, you know, comfort them, or what they will do. So I would say reach out to anyone. So you may not be able to solve the problem. Eventually, you may need to refer that person to a professional, but you may be a lifesaver being there. So I would say, whether it's a known person, whether it is an unknown person, it is always good to approach. Just ask, you know, do you want some water? Are you hurt in some way? Did something happen? So just introduce yourself. And, you know, if you feel that they are feeling embarrassed, I you know, try to put yourself, you can say that, you know, I was feeling very low a few days back. So, you know, I felt that maybe you are feeling the same. So try to empathize with them. That is very important. And I think that is an attitude we need, because I don't know, particularly in India, I feel we ignore when people are around. Whereas one thing I noticed when I was abroad is, if someone is not well or someone is crying by themselves, they're never left alone. Like, even though it is a very individualistic society, people go up and approach even unknown people. So of course, keeping your safety in mind, but do approach if
Yes.
you can. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
I see Sushma. Yeah, Sushma Shri. Hand raised. Is there a question that Sushma wants to ask?
Sushma, are you there?
She's not there, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, as I said, if there are more questions that you would want to share, feel free to, you know, write in, and I will definitely respond. Maybe just give me a couple of days, but I will definitely respond to any of the questions that come up. Because see, in 1 hour we talk about a lot of generic tips. I would definitely want you to apply that. But having said that, there may be specific things that you want to know about. So feel free definitely to, you know, to share and, you know, to write it.
Yes, ma'am. So I think everyone are done with their questions, ma'am.
Okay, that's good.
Now we can wind up the session with the vote of thanks by Secretary Rohina Swami.
Hello everyone, I am Rotractor Roinas Banu. I feel privileged to address the vote of thanks for this session. We are delighted to have your presence, ma'am. First of all, thank you so much for taking out time from your busy schedule to address us and patiently answer all the questions we posed. These COVID situations are uncertain that all our physical, mental and emotional states getting affected along with education too. And I'm sure this session had an impact for all the audience and participants. We hope to bring on such big sessions with you like this in the future too. And I would like to thank the Rotary Club of Keetham for giving us the stage to conduct the event. And also I would like to thank President of RECG for giving us this opportunity, and the entire team who had worked for this event. And a big thank you for all the audience who have patiently listen to the session. Thank you guys. Thank you, ma'am.